Martin Luther King Jr. said, "White America must see that no other ethnic group has been a slave on American soil. That is one thing that other immigrant groups haven't had to face." Dr. King was responding to a question about the model minority myth, or the idea that certain minority and/or immigrant communities are law-abiding and productive, such as Jewish and Asian Americans, while others, such as the Black and Hispanic communities, are ridden with poverty and crime. Not only is this a gross generalization based on stereotypes, but it does not take into account the institutionalized racism that these groups have faced for centuries. Firstly, Dr. King pointed out that, while many immigrant groups have been discriminated against because of class, not all of these communities have been discriminated against because of race. The other thing is that color became a stigma, he said. This goes for other minority groups as well. For example, Hispanic or Latino Americans with darker skin tones or Hispanic-sounding names may face more discrimination than others. Dr. King also described the disadvantage that Black Americans have been placed at, saying, "America freed the slaves in 1863, but gave the slaves no land or nothing in reality to get started on. At the same time, America was giving away millions of acres of land in the West and Midwest, which meant there was a willingness to give the white peasants from Europe an economic base, and yet it refused to give its black peasants from Africa, who came here involuntarily in chains and had worked for free for 244 years, any kind of economic base." Members of other BIPOC communities are also burdened with histories of oppression and inequality. Not only are these communities burdened with the legacy of past injustice, but they are faced with ongoing systemic inequality. The education, housing, employment, and justice systems continue to discriminate against members of BIPOC communities, and the proof is in the numbers. For example, the median net worth and annual income for Black and Hispanic or Latino families are drastically lower than those of white and Asian families, despite the labor force participation rates of white and Asian Americans being only slightly higher than that of Black Americans and lower than that of Hispanic or Latino Americans. Due to police brutality, racial bias, language barriers, and/or immigration status, members of BIPOC and immigrant communities are also given harsher sentences, wrongfully convicted, and killed by police drastically more than other groups. In conclusion, there are two main reasons that the model minority myth is a lie. Firstly, these supposedly crime and poverty-ridden communities are actually just like any other groups of people. The majority are educated and law-abiding, and to suggest otherwise is the definition of racist. In Tulsa, Oklahoma, for instance, Black Americans created a successful and prosperous community known as Black Wall Street, which thrived in the early 20th century. However, at the same time, these communities face obstacles more numerous and difficult than other groups. The same Black Wall Street, which was so successful, was burned and looted by a white mob in 1921. The massacre claimed the lives of hundreds and injured hundreds more. Dr. King said, "It's a cruel jest to say to a bootless man that he ought to lift himself by his own bootstraps. It is an even crueler jest to say that he ought to lift himself while he is being actively pushed down."